Hello and welcome to the Empowered, Sensitive and Creative podcast. My name is Rim. I'm an artist, a certified life coach and an NLP practitioner, and the creator of the Empowered, Sensitive and Creative retreats. Passionate about celebrating joy and beauty in the everyday, especially when things are falling apart, I'm insatiably curious about human nature, and I look into the world with reverence, awe, and a sense of wonder. Tune in for stories exploring healing through creativity, art, embracing sensitivity, and navigating the subconscious mind. I'll talk about the struggles that highly sensitive and creative people face, and share my experiences, insights, and favorite tools along the way. I'm here to empower you to turn what we often deem to be a curse into your biggest gift. I believe that the more we create together, the more we heal the world. So let's dive in. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowered, Sensitive and Creative podcast. I'm so happy and grateful for you tuning in. I'm super excited about this episode today because I talk with my guest, Faye Colombo, about a topic that is so dear to my heart. It's creativity. The creative flow, the creative process, and trusting the process. And it's funny because you will hear during the conversation all the stuff we talk about is exactly illustrated by how this episode came about, because I had a conversation with her before to talk about this episode, to get to know each other and plan a little bit ahead. And I thought, okay, we're gonna talk about intuition and about entrepreneurship, creative entrepreneurship. And I had prepared loosely, but I had prepared a set of questions and stuff. And I told her, okay, we're gonna talk about this topic. And then when we actually recorded the episode, I just didn't really talk about the things I had planned. It was more like, for me, it was more like tuning in to the flow, the flow of the conversation, and being present to what she was saying, to what Jennifer was saying, and then me bouncing back on that. And at the end, the conversation took another turn. And at the end of the recording, we were like, wow, we reflected on that, and we thought it's exactly an illustration of what we were saying. Having a little bit of structure, once you start something, like when you start a project, a creative project, but letting the creativity, letting intuition, letting the flow coming through us, and doing its thing, doing its magic thing. And it's like a co-creation. So I really felt like this episode was a co-creation between us, and it's like a very beautiful dance between two people communicating and expressing and sharing. And I think that's really the essence of creativity for me. Before we dive into the conversation, let me introduce her first. Faye Colombo is an artist, creative guide, and designer of card decks and journals. She believes everyone is creative and anyone can use art as a form of self-care, meditation, a way to tap into creative flow and discover lots of lessons along the way. When creating journals and card decks, her intention is to pair energetic art with tools for transformation to have an even bigger impact. She is also a highly sensitive person. And as you will hear from the conversation, we talk quite a bit about human design, and I felt like more and more in the recent months that I've been more and more learning about human design, and I find it more and more interesting that's just part of the conversation. It's not the main topic. I just want to precise before you run away if you're not too much into it. I just think it's an interesting way to pinpoint or to spot patterns, behavioral patterns. That's it. Anyway, I think you will really enjoy this conversation and be inspired. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, Jennifer. Welcome to the podcast. And welcome to have you here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Okay, first, tell me a bit about yourself. Where are you from and where are you based right now?
Yeah, so I'm originally from New York in the United States, and I currently live one state over, but still easy access to New York City. So fun to be had with still lots of museums and everything there. And I'm an artist, a creative guide. I also design and create card decks and journals for myself and for other people, creating those tools of transformation, which is really, really fun. And I just adore creating. And I think everyone is creative and we get to play creatively every single day, even though I think some people don't realize it.
Yeah, I agree. I so agree with you. And we're gonna talk more about this, but first I want to make a remark about New York City
Yeah.
because for me it's so special. When I was a design student, fashion student, we took a school trip to New York, and it was my first time. Actually, it was my first time in North America, first time in the US, first time in New York, and it was so exciting. And I remember it was 1 week, and we went to see so many museums. I remember back then I was like, oh, so many museums, it's exhausting. But now I feel like it was such a chance to see all that beauty, all this art from all over the world in one city. And then we visited so many things like streets, shops, parks, cafes. I remember it was an amazing trip. I still remember. So yeah, very nourishing.
Yes, definitely. And I'm fortunate too where there's cool stuff by where I am too, without having to go to the city. I mean, that's what's kind of nice too. There's so many places now all around the entire world that you can go visit.
Yeah, definitely. I'm all for traveling. And it's true. I think it has changed. I think, like, for example, in France, before, still, okay, still Paris is Paris, but before it was like, oh, Paris. But now there's so many cities who develop their infrastructure, their environment, and so many cool things. And also, thanks to internet, I think we get to see all the amazing things that other people, other cultures are doing all around.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to say, a few years ago when I was in France, we were actually in Paris, and we did go to the usual museums. But one of my favorite things to do was actually to just wander around the streets. And we would go into some of the smaller, lesser known churches, and they would be very quiet in there, right? There weren't really any lines and things and stuff. And we liked being able to just go in there and be able to see all of the really cool architecture and stained glass windows. And sometimes there was artwork in there. And it was like I had my own private museum to myself because there were those were not necessarily the places where people were going. So it was these beautiful hidden treasures all over the place, which I really adored.
I agree with you. Now I don't plan I don't plan museum trips anymore when I travel to a new place. Before it used to be, the thing to do. And now I'm like, whatever, if I have time, maybe, but it's exactly, I agree with you. The museum, the real art is for me, it's in the streets, the park, the little corner. I love just walking and not knowing where I would go and just following. Oh, okay, shall I go there? Let's turn over here. It's like feeling the vibe of the city.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, before we start our conversation, I want to ask you if you know your human design and your astro. I'm a big geek about that.
Oh, yes, I do. I'm in human design, I'm a generator. I'm a 3-5 line with an emotional authority.
You're three
And
five.
yes. um and my signs, I'm a Capricorn, and I cannot remember what my other two sub signs are, but I am a Capricorn as my main sign.
Okay, so quite driven.
Yes. Which can be very helpful because as an artist, I can actually be very organized as well. So it's
Totally.
extraordinarily helpful.
It is definitely. It's definitely helpful. It balance, and you're an HSP.
Yes.
You're a fellow HSP, so it's good to have this organized, organized skills to counterbalance all the things that are going on within.
Yes, I totally have discovered I don't like full freedom and fluidity, and I don't like full structure. I need a balance and like an interwoven of the two depending on like what it is that I'm doing.
Mm, totally. I was laughing a bit earlier, not laughing, but I was doing a face when you say you're a 3-5 in human design because I'm a 5-1. And I know the 5 profile is quite tricky to handle sometimes. It's for those who don't know, the 5 is the profile line of the heretic, and also like the one who is who can see clearly the others, but like people cannot see them. We can never, like, people project on them basically. So it's sometimes it's a bit like, like one of the big thing that HSPs go through is not feeling understood. But as part of the 5 profile, this is something that comes again and again and again and again. Is it your experience as well?
Yeah, for sure. And now that I know a little bit more about human design, and I'm still trying to learn more about it, but what I've come to learn in more recent years too is, you know, I felt that way, and I felt kind of not seen or understood. And I think it is because I was trying to fit into systems that I didn't necessarily fit into and were kind of out of alignment for me. And now I'm working on stepping more into alignment and following like what works for me and my heart's truth. And it can be very challenging at times because it will go against the grain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's also challenging our past beliefs, and like even if we grow and we more aligned, it's not like, oh, I went to the other side and that's it, I will never move back. It's kind of a balance, like I like to say it's like one step forward, two steps backward. And sometimes I feel like, oh, why I'm going through this again, but then we're still putting another foot forward. So in the grand scheme of things, even if you do like this, you're still going ahead, you're still growing, and it's still, yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Um, but knowing that about myself is also kind of a relief because you're like, oh, okay. And then I happen to listen to some other people that coincidentally happen to also be the same, either generator 3-5 line or Manny Gen 3-5 line. And I was like, I wonder if I really get what they're saying and like stuff is landing for me because of that. Like they would talk about things that they sort of filled in the gaps for of all different sorts of energetics and other things for me that I was like, oh, that landed really well. I understand what that person's saying. And I didn't quite have it before. Like I sort of understood something, but I had like puzzle pieces missing. And then,
Yeah.
I've heard these various things, and I was like, I was kind of curious. I was like, I wonder if it really resonates because it's coming from a similar line. So like they're more speaking like my language, essentially, like filling in those gaps for me.
Could be, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I've been attracting more and more five lines recently. So that's interesting. And then you have the three, which is everybody in my family has the three except me. But I think the three is great for an artist. It's all about trying, experimenting, failing, and trying again.
Yes, we like to experiment. And I definitely feel like, and I know we're going to get into this, I had to do this, kind of comes back to like really being in alignment with myself. When I started painting again years ago, I had taken a break from painting for a while. Even though I was actually in a creative career and field, I didn't have my own painting practice. And when I decided to paint again, I had to do a lot of unlearning of some things because I got so stuck in old thoughts and beliefs or trying to achieve an outcome that I really had to let go of so I could start painting from really my heart and my soul and like express what wanted to be expressed. And I really became comfortable with going and exploring and just accepting that I'm going to sit down to create. This may or may not go in the garbage can, and that's okay. And it took me a while to get to that point, but oh, when I got there, oh my gosh, what freedom. And then if I look at it as if I'm ever working on something like for a client, like let's say, and it obviously has to have an outcome and there's an expectation. I now, instead of kind of getting gripped a little bit by fear or procrastination because I'm trying to make something with this outcome or perfect, I'm like, well, if I'm not happy with it, I just start again. And that's amazing to be able to like have that now.
Yes, 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 yes. So important. And since we were talking about the five, I found that the key for the five to not be always feeling misunderstood and unseen and all of that is to first like use your own expectation, like how can I say, like use your own self to validate yourself, like not paying so much attention to other people's expectations, to learn
Mm.
to go within and like, okay, what I'm doing, it has to be for me first. It doesn't mean that you can, of course you want to your clients to be satisfied with what you do, but first it's here.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
showing my heart
beautiful.
for those who are just listening. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I'm totally taking that in because I think that's the first time I heard that put that way. And that's certainly something that um I'm shifting towards and I've been evolving towards. And I'm gonna take that with heart what you just said and like really focus on that inner knowing that then it will ripple effect out.
Yes. It's funny because most of the time in our upbringing, we are not taught this kind of things. And you're a generator like me, and we are taught like because the generator is supposed to follow what lights them up, right? So, but we have this conditioning that it's selfish, but actually being selfish is it's actually in the interest of everyone around, because when we are quote unquote selfish and following our heart and doing what lights us up, we have this light surrounding us and it's making people around us feel good and happy and light. Otherwise, especially five people, like line five, we can be so heavy. There's this intensity. I know I can be very heavy sometimes if I'm not following what lights me up, and if I'm like, what are they gonna say about me? I feel like myself. I feel like I'm suffocating myself.
I totally resonate with what you're saying, and I noticed, and this is a journey, right? Like human design is newer to me, and I'm still learning. I mean, we're always all learning, and we're always all evolving. Um, But when I first read about the generator, and I was like, oh, wow, that makes so much sense. And when I'm not really doing stuff that lights me up and brings me joy, I very easily, my battery just goes down and I can land in frustration too. So when I'm in that flow and I can feel it, that joy, I'm like, oh, okay. It's like I get to ride this wave and I'm like, I got it. I got it. Okay. But I can very easily get pulled back into
Oops.
I love when that happens, right? It's easy for me to dip down into um what we've been taught, right? So that's my current, like, that is something I am actively working on shifting and evolving, is being in that place of more what lights me up and brings me joy, and like really like sets my soul on fire, and brings me that joy. And I'm a work in progress. That's probably that 5 line, I guess.
Yes, 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 but aren't we all though?
Oh,
Life is a life. Okay, let me take my violin. Life is a journey. But
it's true.
anyway,
It's
that's
true.
good because I wanted to ask you. I was planning to ask you towards the end, but it doesn't matter. Let's roll with it. I wanted to ask you how, like, what are your boundaries, or what are the practices that you set up to protect your energy and to make sure you have time to do what lights you up and follow your heart.
Yeah, this is such a good question, and this is a really good question for me because this can be tricky for me because it's easy for me to like bump a little bit to the other side of like not doing that, and it typically comes around my business. But lately, what I've learned to do, and this has been extremely helpful for me, and this is true for anybody, whether it's life or business. For me specifically, it's about time management. And what I mean by that is really more about my energy management. So, I know that I don't want to be on over a certain amount of calls per day, right? So, like, I have my schedule limited, right? Like, where it's when it hits a certain number of people who can talk to me in a day, it's like, okay, no more. Like, now it's blocked off. Um, I don't like to do an entire day of meetings, right? Like, I only want to do, a certain number. And I really try to do networking and things that fill my cup in addition to being part of the business, where I tend to hang out in spaces that are more not strictly just about networking, but they tend to be places where if somebody's going through a life or business problem, you can ask for support from the group. And that has been really key for me too, where when these things happen that are completely out of our control, um, you can lean on somebody and say, hey, I'm going through X, Y, and Z. This family thing has come up, or this thing has come up in my business. I need some support, whether it's I need an ear, or do you have a suggestion, or whatever it is. So I try to hang out in spaces that are also very, very nourishing and supportive. Um, and something I do is as well is I'm not a fan of huge crowds, so I tend to hang out in smaller spaces. Um, in person, when I go out in person, even going to stores and stuff, I kind of usually know like when it's busy and when it's not going to be busy. And I tend to lean into working my schedule around, let me go when I know it's going to be quieter. And that's not always possible. So if that happens, I know before I go into a situation where there's going to be a lot of energy and there's going to be a lot of people, um, what I love to do, and this has been so helpful and beneficial to me, is I will just take a few moments to ground myself. And I will, imagine like deep roots down into the earth and that I'm grounded and strong, but I'm fluid and can move up at the top. Those of you, I'm doing like a tree thing, who are only listening to the audio. um, And I just take a moment to like get grounded and centered and remind myself that I am safe. And I imagine, an energetic bubble around me where I'm asking that like my energy is protected and not like intertwining with other people's energy. And that has been extraordinarily helpful to me. So those are a few of the things that I do.
Wow, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
It's lovely. Thank you. I love it. I think it's so important. And it doesn't take a lot of time and you can do it anywhere.
Yes. It's just really, especially like when you start to get good, like if you've never done this before, you may not get it right away. Like it may take you a bunch of times to get it, but now I can do it fairly instantaneously. I could do it in like a minute, just like take a minute in the car before I go someplace. So if it takes you a little longer, like don't worry. If it's new to you, it might take you a little longer to like feel that or get a little bit more practiced in it. But that is one of my favorite things to do. Yeah.
It's amazing because our neural pathways, like because you've done it, practiced it, you practice it, you practice it. So it's like you've imprinted your subconscious with this perception, this feeling, this habit. And now, even when you do it just a few seconds, or automatically there is the switch in your brain that sends the signal. Oh, she's asking me to feel like this, remember that, remember this. So it's also really important. What I find is really helpful when you do this at the beginning is to really connect. I know I'm always talking about the senses, is connecting to your senses, because that's how the brain can remember things. So but even if you don't have time, it's like, if sorry, even if you're not used to practice it, that's what I mean. You may not like, you can still do something. Imagine you're in your car
Mhm.
and you're stressed. Okay, maybe you cannot really practice the grounding because you haven't practiced it before, not very well, but already having the intention, oh, I feel like I need to ground. And as you said, that you can just connect to your senses, feel it. If you're driving and there is a tree, just look at the tree, well, quickly because you're driving, but you can look without looking, visualizing it, and you can instantly imagine the texture, or pay attention to a smell you like. You can think, oh, I love vanilla, 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 something like that. It helps already.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love what you said about intention because sometimes that intention and that awareness is all you need. And you were mentioning the senses, and I forgot to mention another thing that I love to do. And then you brought up smell. If I like to use essential oils. I like to diffuse them sometimes when I'm working in my office or just in my home. And the different scents obviously can be either uplifting or grounding or, whatever it is that you want to do. So sometimes I have a couple of bracelets that you can actually drop essential oils on, and the scent remains for quite a long time. So I will use those sometimes, and I will do grounding oils and calming oils on the bracelet. So if I'm out, or if like I know I'm going to be in like a big crowd of people for a social situation or event or something, I usually will have that on so I can, if I need to, just kind of casually just wave my hand, and I can get that grounding scent like right there for me.
Lovely. So organization is key.
Yes.
If you want to set boundaries and honor your boundaries, make sure you have time for your energy. Start on your organization skills.
Yeah, I mean, I think being organized is helpful for sure. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I was kind of joking, but not really. I think it's we sometimes, especially the artist type, tend to overestimate the use of organizing. But when I say organizing, when we talk about this, we're not being like the crazy crazy person that we almost all of us are in our society, but like having 20,000 or 20,000 stuff on your to-do list and being like No. It's like prioritizing your self-care stuff. I think it can be useful to even write, like, for example, imagine you want to do this, what you do for your bracelets, your essential oil. You could put it in your calendar if you're, because I know, like, new practices, it takes time to remember to do it. At the beginning, we do it because we're excited. Oh, I'm gonna take care of myself now. And then something comes up or time goes by and you forget. So you can put it in your calendar alert before preparing my bracelets or preparing my essential oil thing until it becomes ingrained.
So true. And I do block in time on my schedule, like on my calendar for self-care. And this is where I was talking about in the beginning how I will weave structure and fluidity together. Sometimes I know that it may not land in the time slot, or sometimes I may not have it slotted in for time. It's just there because I know it's something I want to make happen, at some point in the day. And sometimes I have 20 minutes to do something, and sometimes I have an hour to do something. And I leave it open too. If it's a nice day out, I might want to go walk at the beach, and I'm going to pick a beach walk. If it's a rainy day out, it might be that I choose to meditate or do a little movement practice, or I'm journaling, or maybe it's a combination. So I keep that, like, the structure is, yes, I'm going to do this. The fluidity part is, these are the things I like to do, and I'm going to see what feels good for me to do today.
Totally, I do the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's we can trust ourselves that we will know what we need. We don't have to stick to a specific. I mean, it might work for some people, but if you've noticed it doesn't work for you, you can trust that you instinctively you will know what you need at that moment. But you just need to make sure you make time for it.
Yeah.
I want to ask you something else, because the idea of structure and fluidity is really interesting. And since you are an emotional, from human design, you're emotional generators, and you're an HSB, and you're an artist, how do you, like, what I mean is, we don't always, I mean, HSPs, we have big feelings, we have big emotions, we have a lot of, we can be overwhelmed easily. Emotional generator, your emotions, they're like big waves, right? Crashing. So imagine you put time on your calendar for creativity, for make art. Like, today is going to be my art session. And you really don't feel like it. You have your big emotion. Imagine something happened, you're triggered. The emotion, you don't feel inspired, blah, blah, blah. How do you navigate that?
Oh, this is such a good question, because this actually happened to me the other day. So I went to go paint, and I was having like a downtime on the roller coaster. That's what happens sometimes when you're an entrepreneur, and also all of these other things. So I didn't really want to paint what I had intended to paint in that state, because it just didn't feel good to me to do that. So when that happens, I'll do a couple of things. I might actually go create, but it may not be what I intended to create. I might actually just be pulling out crayons or watercolors or something, and like actually scribbling out, and like move it, just like literally using my hand to the whatever the tool is that I'm using, crayon, pencil, paint, whatever, to the paper, to help me move some of that energy, to help me move that wave of energy that's coming. It might mean that I go, okay, I need to actually like go outside for a little bit and like go into nature, whether I get to actually go someplace and go to the beach, or I'm just walking around my yard. With the dog, I might go and journal or brain dump. So again, this is that structure but fluidity. I know, like, I need the structure of like I need to do something, but it might look different, or a combination of things, depending on how I'm feeling in that moment. It might actually be calling up somebody and being like, oh, I just need to vent for a couple of minutes. Like, I'm having a time. I just need a couple of minutes. Do you have space for me? And then I'm going to go, like, you move, because sometimes I need to even if I'm just talking to myself or the dog, sometimes it's easy for me to like verbalize like how I'm
Yeah.
feeling so I can go, "Oh, okay, wait a minute. Like I can move through this, or that's not necessarily true. Like how can I, you know, move forward?"
Mm. Yes, it's good to have a sounding board, a mirror, another human, the connection. And actually, it's good to vent sometimes. I know there are a lot of people who believe, oh, you must not say anything negative. It's gonna, it's gonna, show you as a negative person, an angry, nasty person. But come on, I think we all have a dose of nastiness within, and it's okay. It's actually healthy. We're human beings, but as long as we're not like if we're not doing to hurt someone, and if we're not spending our days venting, it's healthy. Especially HSP who tend to always want to naturally be nice and kind and and not hurt other people's feelings. Sometimes we have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, sometimes it's I need to express to somebody, and just say, I feel frustrated right now. And, sometimes just acknowledging it,
Yeah,
I'm like, "Okay, cool. Like I'm good now."
yeah, that's enough.
Um, or sometimes I know who to call or to text or whatever, and I say, "I'm feeling X, Y, and Z, and this is coming up. Can you help me like reframe this?" And, then whatever. And when I say vent, I don't mean like all day for like,
Yeah, no, no, I
hours
know,
on
I
end.
know.
No,
It's fine.
I know, I'm talking about just to acknowledge how you're feeling and then like, to move forward.
We all need to vent sometimes. And as long as we do it consciously, exactly as you say, like you're phrasing it, you're not phrasing it in I think the danger is if we are not aware of our, so like when we are not aware of our patterns of how sometimes we can be intense or negative or la la la,
Mhm,
we could for like these people who spend their life complaining, most of the time they're even probably not aware they're doing that, and we don't want to be to become like that because we know it's unhealthy and it's not pleasant.
mhm,
But if you do it knowing, if you know you're going to vent for 5 minutes because you really need it, that's what needs to express, then it's fine. Then it's easy. It's like a cloud. It comes, it goes.
mhm.
And if you just say to the person, I just need to vent right now,
Yeah.
the person is prepared. And I think it's easier. Yeah. In French, we have this phrase, il faut appeler un chat. Do you say that in English? We need to call a cat a cat?
I can't think of it, but I feel like we have I feel like we have a very similar phrase.
Naming things is healthy, actually. Not
I mean, I have found that sometimes, whether it's an emotion or a belief or an old story, sometimes by me just acknowledging it, whether it's like out loud or I write it, I'm like, oh, okay. Like sometimes it's an instantaneous, like completely shift out of it. Sometimes I might have to do a little bit more digging or work, but when the instantaneous one happens, I'm always grateful for that.
Yeah, and it shows us that actually there is nothing to be. We don't need to be scared of our emotions. Our emotions don't make us who we are. They are passing by. They are coming through us. They come and they go. If you name it, it's easier to go. If you don't name it, if you push it away, you repress it. It stays stuck inside. We are not our emotions, and that brings me to my next question:
Mhm.
art and emotions. It's not a question, it's a topic.
Love this topic.
Yes, let's talk about this. How do you find, or how do you do you use art as a way to process your emotions? Do you find it useful, or is it just a mind emptying thing for you? Like, what's your take on that?
I 100% use art to process my emotions. I have other tools too, as I mentioned, but being an artist, and I've always loved drawing and painting and like playing with Lego blocks and all of the things since I was a kid. So, it's of course like number 1. Like it's up there in my top, my top 5. It's most likely number 1 on most days. I think it's an amazing way to process emotions. Just like for some people, movement is a great way to process emotions. And sometimes I actually combine the two. So I'll give you an example of how I realized how powerful this was. So, several years ago, I had like a lot of emotions coming up, and my husband even said to me, he's like, "Go into your office and just go play and just paint." So I took a huge canvas and I was just playing, I was painting. It was only for me. It was never something I was ever going to sell or show or anything like that. And, I still had it, and years later, it was still with me. And one day I put it up behind me on a Zoom background because I was blocking,
The light.
I had a lot of projects going on, so I was blocking my office. And it was really fascinating because people kept commenting on this painting and having different reactions to it. And I was like, this is so fascinating. This isn't something that I did by technique or even thinking about color or anything. Like it was literally pure raw emotion, and people were responding to it. Um, so I think it's a fantastic way to process emotions, and something I use all of the time. And it really can be as simple as using crayons and like a piece of paper that you have out of your computer, or like a little sketchbook. It doesn't have to be something complicated. I have heard repeatedly from different people who practice different things that we need to feel an emotion. I've heard different things between 90 seconds and 2 minutes to fully feel it and then allow it to go. So art is such a great way for me to do that because I can pop on a song if I want to, and I can just go do my thing. And I will start to notice, like, if I'm feeling tension or stressed in my body as I start to do the thing. And I will, those of you again who are listening to just the audio, I am actually like moving my hands and arms in very large motions. Sometimes I will really like, I want more of my body to be in it. And I will use that as a way. And I find that it happens pretty quickly. Like I can do it in a couple of minutes and just acknowledge, whether it's frustration or sadness or whatever it is. I will also say, I know we're talking about more of like the lower vibe stuff because that's really what we don't want to hang on to. But this is also a fun way to also capture joy and peace and calm and happiness as well. It doesn't have to just be used for like those lower, denser emotions. And I use it for both. And I think it's a beautiful way to process. And I have found that all of a sudden, like I will go to do that. And again, this is just like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes if I'm really like jamming and getting into the whatever song I put on and really like just getting lost in it. Um, I will notice, if you stop to notice after, you probably will feel a shift in your energy and even like the tension in your body. At least that's what my personal experience is.
Hmm. Yes, it's mine too. And everyone
Yeah.
I know who I work with and who try something creative, even if they're not artists, you always see a smile on their face after a while.
Mhm.
Okay, maybe those, if you do it without, if you manage to let go of the need to perform, because
Mhm.
actually this can create another set of whole set of emotions. We'll talk about this later. But if you do it, if you release the need to have a result and you just
Mm.
stay present in the experience, then it's like connecting to your inner child.
Well,
It's
you
like,
said it beautifully. You said stay present in the moment, or
yeah.
however you said it, right? Like stay connected in the moment. And it's not necessarily, I mean, when I do that, again, like I literally have just, an inexpensive sketchbook that I do this in, right? Nobody's going to see it. I'm not, again, it's not something for me to sell. If I do it on a piece of paper, it's probably going to go in the trash can because I don't want it taking up space in my office. If you're worried about that outcome, you could look at it as, oh, this is me just doodling like I was like a kid, and this, I'm just going to toss this kind of. um I give this analogy to people because they usually, it clicks, where, when you're journaling or you're brain dumping, you're writing, you're doing that free writing exercise, but you're not worrying about the grammar or the spelling yet, or if you wrote a sentence correctly, or even if what you're writing makes sense, right? That comes later. So this is sort of the same thing, except instead of writing, you're using artistic tools to express yourself. And listen, there have been some times where I have done those, I call them creative explorations, whether it's either around an emotion, I'm moving through an emotion, or I just want to play and just like purely like do it to like tap into the creative flow and use it as a way to warm up. Sometimes I look at something and I'm like, oh, you know what? Especially if I'm using my watercolors to just play, I'm like, oh, you know what, this could actually be a really cool, interesting idea. This might be actually something I take to actually experiment with a collection or do some work with. It's
Hmm.
really, to me, when you do these creative explorations or these warm-ups, it's about the process, not like the outcome is the process, not what actually winds up on the paper.
Definitely. And you have surprises, just as you say. Exactly.
You can be surprised. I mean, you never know. Like you might go, "Oh, wow." Especially if I've done some of these activities with people who are both artists who just want to get into that creative flow and like get into the vibe before they go work on like a collection or things. And I've also done it with people who just want to do this for self-care, for self-discovery, to just relax and have time for themselves. And sometimes they really surprise themselves and they're like, "Oh." And a lot of times the surprise is in like, "Wow, I really enjoyed this. Like I really needed to relax for this period of time." Sometimes they're like, "Oh my gosh, I love the direction that this is going. I'm going to keep going with this, or I'm going to explore this more." You never know. I think it's being open to the possibilities of
Yes.
whatever happens.
And it's it's a good way to to remind, like, to stay humble in a way. Like, our brain, our mind cannot see all the possibilities, even though we can think really, really hard, as hard as we can. We can produce amazing things with this, with our head, with our brain. But that being said, there's something that that is bigger. Okay, I'm not a religious person, but I would say kind of. I believe that I believe in this notion that there is something bigger, something magic, something that we cannot put a finger on, and thank God, because I think if everything was proven, could be proven in mathematics, and I mean it's very good, but we need this little thing of this little element of surprise and magic and things doing their things without us. Oh, we kind of do it because it's through our hands if we're painting or
Mhm.
drawing, but it's bigger than our hand drawing. It's bigger than our brain trying to do something. It's kind of the art has a life on its own, and that's just very, very special.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And you know, as you were saying that, what was coming to mind is, I mean, how many of us who are artists, and when I say artists too, I'm not talking about necessarily a painter, right? This could be a dancer, this could be a writer, like whoever is creating something, right? How many times have you gone in with a plan, and then as you're actually like in the creative flow and like making it happen, your plan completely goes out the window, and you know you're sort of being guided what to paint, what to create, or how to move your body, or, whatever it is. And that's really cool. And it's like, are you willing to let go of the plan? Because I'll tell you, my plans go out the window more than I think half the time. And now I kind of go into something with a very, very broad or loose plan, if unless somebody's obviously like, here, this is my pet, like, you're gonna paint this pet portrait for me, right? Unless it's like super, super specific. um I kind of allow myself to be guided, like, as I'm working and creating, to just see like what is actually coming through to be shared on the paper.
So when you do some specific like commissions, like for example, somebody could ask you to paint a dog and their dog and you could do it.
Yes, yeah.
So
So
how do you
I
handle how do you,
so I mean, I kind of lean on my training from many, many years ago. But what I discovered a few years ago was, it's all about intention for me. No matter what I'm painting, even if somebody asks me to paint a watercolor for them, like of their pet, or like from a photograph, right? Or combining some photographic things, right? And it's not abstract. I still ask them for an intention, like, why do you want this? Or if it's the pet, I might want to know about their personality, because I really like to work with the energy of what it is that I'm being asked to do as I'm creating. And I discovered this a few years ago because somebody I knew had asked me to do a bunch of pet portraits that um she had several animals. She had a couple of dogs and a couple of cats. So I had done them, and then she asked me to do another one as a gift. And it still looked great, but something felt off to me, and it took me a while to figure out what it was. And I was like, "Oh, this is really interesting. It's because I actually didn't know anything about the dog." Like, even though I had previously not had asked her, because we knew each other on Instagram, I kind of already had, and she would post her animals. I already felt their vibe, their energy. Like, I kind of like knew their personalities. So that was like a big realization and moment for me, of like really, really having a clear and good intention to work with, whether it's something completely from imagination or actually being asked to do something from a photograph. And the other time that that was also very, very crystal clear to me was I was going to submit into a local art show, and there was a theme, and I had a couple of ideas, and I was working on something, and I was working on this painting, and it just felt off. I showed it to a friend. I showed it to a couple of friends of mine. And because I was just curious, and I hadn't even finished it. I was just curious what they would think. And I already knew. I was looking for them to confirm what my feelings were, my thoughts were. And there was something very flat about it and off about it. And I don't mean from a technical perspective. It just didn't feel right. And I realized it was because I was trying to force myself into doing something versus being more open to what the possibilities were and what I actually really wanted to create
yeah.
from my own intention. So those were two really big lessons for me personally. And not everybody may work this way, but I really like to work with an intention and energy behind something, no matter what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yes, that's beautiful. I agree. Me too. I like to. I think it changes everything. It helps us to connect to it. We know what we're doing, why we're doing it. And I think it's also like, as you say, it's open. It helps us to open to possibilities. And I feel like it's like an instruction to or like a break or something, or a switch to the brain to say, hey, relax. Like we're just
Yeah.
gonna, we're doing this. That's where we want to go. But then let's see which way we're gonna go there. There are many ways, many roads, and we don't always know the one that's the right one at the
It's
moment,
true.
because could be the right one today, but not the right one next week.
Yeah, I've often heard, and I've experienced this myself. I'm curious if you've experienced this, where sometimes I've said, I'm like, I'm pretty sure the painting is painting me. Like, I'm I'm just like the conduit through what it's coming through. Like sometimes, you know, it's telling me what it wants, not what my brain originally set out to do. And that's okay.
Yes. Yes, I experienced that. I actually, and I would say the more I lean into that, the better I feel and the less self-conscious I feel about my art.
Mhm.
I remember in art school, it was design school, but kind of in French we kind of call it applied art, and we had a lot of art classes. It kind of ruined the fun for me. I used to make art in my childhood all the time, experimenting, drawing, and then I went to art school and I felt like, oh my god, it's like torture. And they did teach me. I did learn some good things, and there was some opening of the mind, and maybe a sense of aesthetic, anyway, there were some good things. But something that I found was really frustrating is I felt like, or maybe it's me who was internalizing the pressure. It could be as well, but I felt there's such a pressure to direct where I need to go or where my art needs to go. There is one way or five ways, let's say, that are acceptable to be an artist or to paint or to draw. And if I'm not in that, if I cannot do it, if I'm not doing it, it's not valid. And and I could never conform to the trends or to the styles in art. And I don't know, at that time I felt like, okay, maybe I'm not good. And of course,
Yeah.
now I changed my mind about that, thankfully. But
Yes, right? That's kind of like that unlearning, right? I feel like I can relate to what you're saying, and I know there's many more artists and creatives who can relate to what you're saying, and I think that's um for me sometimes that's where too much structure and things like that like kind of hindered the creativity instead of um I like to think now of I got to the place, and it took me a while to get to this place and doing creative explorations and like letting go of this idea of perfection and everything, where I had technique, but now technique is just part of like the foundation and it's not in the driver's seat. So it's there, and but it's playing a supporting role now, where like my heart and my expression and soul, whatever you want to call it, is in the driver's seat, and the other is playing the supportive role.
wow,
Sometimes it's reversed.
yeah,
I had it reversed for a very long time.
yeah, yeah. I had it reversed, not in art, but in design.
Yeah.
and and I felt it's hindering my creativity. Yeah, I felt like, you mentioned you had a creative role before. Me too. I was working in the creative field, so technically, I was a creative, but I felt like my creativity was dying, and as my creativity was dying, I felt like my soul is dying as well. Didn't light me up anymore at all, even though I used to be passionate about that before.
Mhm.
And I felt like, okay, maybe it's good. I don't regret, because the fact that I fell out of love with that expression, that the design art, creative expression, brought me back to my first love of drawing and colors and art, basically. So in a way, it's good. So I learned what I had to learn from that creative job, the design part, and and then come back to this. And in a way, now I felt like, okay, I'm ready. I don't care about artists, what the school, the
Mhm.
teachers taught me, or the way so many students maybe were better in a nude, uh, a life. How do you call that in English?
Oh,
Life
life
drawing.
drawing.
Yeah, so it's never been my forte. Because I can't paint what I see exactly the way it is. I can't help but just go somewhere else. like I would never be the artist that paints reality the way it is. Like, this, it can't be me, but I made peace with that. And actually I don't need to. Why would I need to? There are so many other talented artists who can do that. I just want to follow what lights me up, what my heart is telling me. It's kind of an obsession as well. Like, as you say, art is going through you. It's telling you what to do. It's the same. I'm like, okay, I know I need to be with watercolor. I know I need to have a black pen, drawing, a pencil. I know I need to have these things. Like it's like a craving. And when I do it, I feel good. And I will just keep doing what my whatever is obsessively taking me towards, and that's it, and that's the end of it. It doesn't matter if it's not a specific way, or yeah.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that. And I mean, now, I do my own work, but I do work for clients, whether it's a painting for their home, or I'm creating a card deck for them, or I'm creating a journal for them. Um, and I absolutely love doing that. And we wind up in this really beautiful co-creative process. And that's part of, I think, me pulling in all of my different careers and backgrounds to get that to happen. Right. So it's actually very fun for me. But in addition to that, I still make sure I have my own creative practice. So, whether it's doing those little explorations to move through emotion, or I'm just painting purely for myself that maybe I create a journal or card deck from, or maybe I don't. I have learned the importance of having my own creative stuff outside of my creative work stuff. And I do also love to go, when I can, take classes that are outside of my area of expertise, right? Like I might want to go take, I took, a couple months ago, I went with friends and we did like this glass fusion class. And it was just so enjoyable. It was very meditative. Like after we learned some stuff, like to just be moving colors around, and just, it was just pure play and like peace and calm. And like I didn't have to worry about anything. Like I just got to do something creative, like outside of painting and watercolors or whatever. So I always share that because I do recommend that for anybody who gets the nudge to do that. At some point I'm hoping to take a pottery class. It just hasn't like lined up yet, because I really just, I want to get messy, and I want to be a beginner, and I want to get my hands in the clay, and I want to, do those things. And I'm not going to worry about doing something perfect the first time. It would be impossible to do something perfect the first time doing something new like that. So I do also love going to play creatively, like outside of that, or even taking a movement class or something too, right? Like I enjoy experimenting with different things to inform my own creative process in my studio.
Yeah. Okay. There are many things I want to say about what you just said. Okay. Ordering my thoughts. Okay. The first thing is, you say you still have part of your art job that is co-creating with your clients. And that's great. And it's also, you can do this because also you as you said before, you've done the work of focusing, like dropping other people's expectations and the need to be perfect, the need to please, and being more in tune with yourself. So it's also thanks to all these practices you have on the side to know yourself better that you can also create some things for somebody else according to their needs. But also, that being said, I imagine they also need to be aware of your style. They want to work with you because of your style. So you're still being true to you. You're not trying to conform into somebody else's expectation of what art should be. They want to work with you for you, right?
Yes, 100%. And the truth is, like, part of the reason why this works is because people do like the way that I work. They are drawn to my work. They trust me to do my job, to express creatively. And I have 100% have had people come and talk to me about doing a project for them. And when I learn more about the project, um, I listen and I'm like, I'm really not the right person for this. Like, this is actually who you need. And sometimes they're like, oh, because I was either recommended or they like my personality and they like my energy. And I'm like, I would be doing a disservice to both you and myself. Like, this isn't the right project. Like, if I know somebody that I can recommend, I recommend it. Or if I don't know somebody, I can give them an idea of, this is actually who you need to achieve what you're looking for. And I think that's important for me too. Like, we were talking in the very beginning about boundaries. Um, saying no to projects when I know I'm not the right fit, or it's really not aligned to me, and I know it would be better off served in somebody else's hands.
Yes,
Yeah.
boundaries. Exactly. And there's also another element I think you would resonate. I imagine you would resonate. I also do commission work from time to time. And I like the idea of co-creation. I love the process of exchanging with somebody else. And I love the challenge that it provides, because when you're trying to, because usually it's okay, it's somebody who wants something. That's the problem, the problematic, let's say. And you're like, okay, what can I do? What can I create to provide the solution, to create? Okay, that's nice. Okay. So I like the idea. So you have the problematic, you come up with solutions, you search, you're like, okay, trying different ways, talking with the person, exchanging, it's also learning from the other. Then you have all this set of parameters that you need to pay attention to, a bit like when you do a design project. The design has much more parameters than art, but also art, it's also the challenge of the format and the time and the whatever. And I think it's really exciting, actually. I like this part. So sometimes it's frustrating. It's like, am I gonna appear? But can I find a solution? What is it gonna look nice? Can I make it? Is it
Mhm.
gonna be? We don't know. But at the end, we find a solution, and of course, it's never really what we imagine it would be. And
Mhm.
if everything goes well, it's even better. And it's so nice. And so I think there's so much, what I mean is there's so much growth and so much creativity that can come from challenges. Like, not
Yes.
everything being uh, the practice, having the practice, oh, no structure, nothing coming in my way, I do whatever I want, it's great, it's one thing. And it's also nice sometimes to have this thing that has parameters, challenges, someone's expectations, even though you're not a slave to it. But it kind of keeps us awake, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely brings in a lot of creative possibilities, right? Even with that restriction, can bring in all of these, those parameters, right? Can bring in tons of creative possibilities. And as you were saying that, I haven't thought about this in years, but many, many years ago, we went to go see a Broadway show. I forgot what the name of it is, or I think I know what the name is, but I'm not going to share in case I'm incorrect. But this is many years ago, and I'm sure this seemed like a very deliberate choice, and I'm sure they had budget, but they kept things really simple to take you through the story. So an example was like, to show you were in a river, like two actors just had a piece of fabric and like moved it. And then they took different like ladders and chairs and things and like made these things. And like, it really, the limitation of props essentially like really actually blossomed the imagination. And it was clearly like a very deliberate choice. So sometimes those, parameters, those restrictions, whatever they are, even though they feel like it's putting you in a box, can actually allow you to really have this very profound, like outside of the box thinking, because you have no choice but to be creative with what you are given.
Yes, they push us to dig deeper
Yeah.
and to
I,
uncover.
yeah, I love that you shared that having to work with these parameters, especially if you're more accustomed or prefer to be more, open and like without all of that.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
a balance. A balance. Yeah, not always going for the challenges. Sometimes simple is
Yes.
good, Don't always like simple as in do what is easy. Sometimes it's healthy.
Mhm.
I know some of us have this can have this tendency to always try to overcomplicate things. So here, so it's a
Yeah.
good balance. And yeah,
That goes back to my boundaries too. I have to put boundaries around myself, as in like I can be I can overcomplicate things, and I know that about myself, so I have awareness around it, and I can pull back when that happens now, or at least I can attempt to, or like phone in some help and go like, I'm overcomplicating something, like help me work the problem. um but I can also put way too many things on my to-do list and think that I can manage to do all of these things in a day. And I have now learned, it's taken me a very, very long time to not do this anymore, is to actually like really prioritize and limit and go, okay, no, 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 no. Like these are all of the things, but this isn't a one day thing. This is like everything that is going to happen throughout this week. And that's a boundary I put on, I need to work with on myself.
yes. Very well said. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because yes, I think many of us struggle with that. There's so much we can do and we want to do and experiment and try and da 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 da. And sometimes it comes from, I think sometimes it comes from a genuine thirst for things, for experiences, but sometimes it can also come as fear or, lack of self-trust or like trying to prove something. Sometimes it can
Mhm.
be a bit,
Well, and creatives too. If you love to learn or you like to experiment, like uh, you know, you know, I have lots of ideas that come in, right? And I'll write them down or whatever, right? So they're in a place. But I have learned to accept that like not all of those things are going to happen. And like that's okay. I trust now that the ones that are supposed to really come forth will come forth. Maybe something happens years down the road and I pick an idea back up. But oh my gosh, I could completely load up my time and my schedule and not really accomplish anything because I could get like, oh no, I want to do this, and 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 I want to do this, which I think is beautiful to get all of these ideas. But then it's a matter of, right, that's that flow. And then it's that taking that structure and then being like, okay, what of these do I actually really want to do and bring forth? And like, let me prioritize which ones. And it's also accept that like not all of this is going to happen.
yes, 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 100%. It can create so much overwhelm, especially
Mhm.
sensitive people. Overwhelm.
Yes.
And then what do we do? And then we burn out and
Mhm.
then we can't do anything. And then,
Yeah. I
yes,
have also I have also learned, I know this is podcast more about creativity, but because my business is tied to my creativity, I have learned I can get very overwhelmed by a lot of things that are available. And that's probably true for everybody, right? There's like a million different structures you can have in place in your business and all of these things. And I always keep coming back to the conclusion of what's the simplest streamlined thing that I can do. I personally do not want complicated, back end stuff, or and I know people that have them and they work really well for them and they're very, very beneficial to them. But to me, it puts me into overwhelm. So I always go back to what's the simplest thing that I can do for myself, for my creative practice, for my business.
yes. And we come back to grounding.
Yes.
Grounding into simplicity and into self-awareness. I would say it's key, self-awareness. Like notice how you notice who you are, what works for you. Of course, experiment, because if you don't experiment, you don't know what works for you. But experiment, be aware, stay aware, and ground all our
And I've definitely
ideas. Yeah, sorry, with all our ideas and creativities, we can very quickly go into the fly in the air, which is beautiful. There is time for flying. And there is time for going back on Earth right now in the material world, because we live here on Earth, and make things comfortable for us.
yes. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely have tried and experimented and tried some things on because, like, I was like, oh, everybody else is doing this. I should do this in my business or whatever. And then I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, this does not work for me. It's like, but I tried it on and I'm like, okay, like, this doesn't work. This was an experiment gone wrong for me. And sometimes I find things obviously that I'm like, oh no, no, no. This is the structure that works really well for me. So yeah.
Yeah, and you said earlier, you say it might work very well for other people, which is true. It might, but it might
Mhm.
not. But we don't know, because so often
It's true.
we take at face value what we see or what people say, but we never really know what's going on inside somebody's head, really, or inside somebody's heart.
It's true.
It's what they say and what's going on, really. Maybe they say it works because they think they should, because they've also heard other
Mhm.
people, and maybe at night they cry because it doesn't work. Who knows? I mean, I'm not wishing that on them, but maybe. Or maybe it's their bread and butter. Maybe they're selling this, so of course they're gonna push you and say it works, that's the only way.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I do believe in finding what works for you. I mean, I personally love sharing on Instagram. I think it's one of my favorite platforms to share behind the scenes stuff in my studio and the work that I'm doing and all the stuff or whatever. I find it to be a very wonderful place for a lot of inspiration, right? Of all different areas. And I know other people who are like, "Oh my gosh, like it's painful for them to like go to post on that platform." So they either do and they just don't like it, or they're like, oh, nope, not for me. So, we are all different, which is so beautiful. And I think it's about, whether it's in your business or your creative practice or life, it's finding that, and this is probably the generator in me, is finding what really like makes you happy and like charges that battery up.
Yes, beautiful. Life is too
Yeah.
short
Mhm.
for not enjoying.
Yeah.
For not, like, I mean, why are we here? Yes, of course we have some responsibilities, but why are we here if it's not to express what's within us and to explore it? And even if you're an artist only on the side and you have another job, like another work,
Mhm.
even when you do this work, like, you probably do it just the way only you can do it, like the way you are, and you don't need to conform to what other people say you need to be. What I mean is, at the end of the day, what really matters is the relationship you have with yourself within, like this awareness. And when you're fine with that, the rest is easier to manage. I'm not saying it's easy, but it gets less heavy, I think, less complicated.
Mm.
There is more freedom.
Yeah, well said.
I wanted to ask you many other things, but I think with that, it's a great way to go for now, to stop for now. But maybe we'll talk another time.
Well, we can talk again. Absolutely.
But before we go, I have a few questions I really like
Mhm.
to ask. And I would like you to tell me, what does it mean being an empowered, sensitive, and creative person for you? What does it mean?
Mm. For me personally, it means really sinking into trust and feeling confident in following my intuition and the nudges that I receive, which, by the way, is a work in progress for me. It's been a work in progress, an evolution. And really that trust in the creative process that I have now is a beautiful thing. That's not something I always had. I had to evolve and develop that.
And that makes it even more precious.
Mm. Yeah.
Beautiful. And then if you were a color, what color would you be?
Oh, turquoise.
Ah, that was easy. Okay.
Yeah, blue is one of my favorite colors. Give me all of the blues. I love all of the blues. So I would be somewhere on the spectrum of the blues. Because I find blue to be such a wonderful, I mean, they're all wonderful colors, but I love that it can be calming, but I love that it can also be powerful. And I love that it can also express grief and sadness, like such a range to it. And I said turquoise because that's a color that's very personal to me, that when I meditate a lot, that's a very specific color comes through as one of my main colors that will come through in energy healing or while I'm meditating.
Oh, yes, I love that. I love turquoise too. I love, yeah, it's soft and bright and alive at the same time.
Mhm.
Mm. But my
Yeah.
color, like the color I go to immediately when I'm meditating is emerald green.
Ooh.
You know, it has changed. When I was younger, it was turquoise, but recently it
Mm,
has evolved to emerald green. That's interesting.
mm,
You know, it's like
mm.
this color when you visualize it, when you feel it,
Mhm.
you feel, for me, I feel nourished and vibrant. I feel like life is here. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, it's beautiful. I love that.
And then if you were a texture, what would you be?
Oh, something velvety soft. Like I would want to be like the feeling of a rose petal,
Oh,
which is on one of my card decks. I was able to get that texture on one of my card decks and it makes me so happy. So that's the texture I would be.
ooh, that feels
Yeah.
so. Mm,
Because like that softness is very like it's very luxurious, but it's also very calming. It's
mm.
very grounding. It's very soothing to me.
Yes, 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 yes. I relate to that. And a scent, if you're a scent.
Oh, a scent. I feel like I would be an orange,
Hmm.
like bright and spreading joy. Because I love to spread joy and calmness through my artwork. And I feel like although an orange is very uplifting, there's something um super calming about it for me too.
Do you use it in your essential oils choice? Like,
I Yeah, so I will diffuse essential oils in my studio. Um I sometimes will use them actually in acrylic paints, but predominantly as a watercolors. I don't actually use them like with my watercolors, oil and
mm.
water. But yeah, they're in the diffuser, so they wind up at points technically in, I guess, a lot of my paintings.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I love bergamot. I use it a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
bergamot is such a great, that is one of my favorites too. And in my first card deck, just so you know, the bergamot card is actually I am nourished, is its affirmation.
that's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. Wow. And tell me a sound, if you're a sound.
Oh, I would be the soft, gentle rolling of the waves. Like when they're just kind of when they just have very little movement to it. It's not completely still, but it's just that soft gentleness that's grazing the sand and then pulling back in and then ebbing and flowing. That would be the sound I would be.
Mm,
These are fun questions.
I can hear it. It's so relaxing.
Yes, I'm all about the peace. I'm all about like how can I come back to calm and peace, and joy is sprinkled in there, but the joy has a softness to it.
Mm, yes. Yes, I'm all up for that. And finally, the taste. If you're a taste, what would you be?
I'd have to go dark chocolate because it's like one of my most favorite things in the entire world.
Dark chocolate,
Yeah.
like more than 70% cocoa, or are you
Yes.
more like
Yes. Like
85, 90?
yeah, like 70% or more with maybe a little sprinkling in of a flavor on occasion.
Orange, maybe?
You know. Yeah, maybe
Orange
aren't like
peel?
dark like orange dark chocolate. Mhm.
Or salt?
Mhm.
Sea
Yeah.
salt.
Oh,
I know sometimes you
love
paint with
seasoning.
seawater, so
Yes, yes, definitely. Salted dark chocolate is one of my most favorite things. So, yeah. That's what I would be. That one. Bring in
yeah,
that ocean vibe too.
lovely. Like earthy chocolate is like, earth and then the sea. And one last question, well, two last questions, but I just thought recently, I want to talk about this. Imagine you are in the government. Haha.
Mm.
What
Oof.
would you change? What is the first thing you would put in place?
Oh goodness, I have a very long list. Um all right, if I only had to pick one thing, I would want to make sure that the arts and the performing arts and the creative stuff are still in all of the schools,
And
along with a very, very, very long list of other things. But since this is the topic we're talking
yes,
about, that's the
yes,
one that I would pick.
the first thing. Then you have time to, do all the rest. But
But
first,
I'll chip away at all the other big problems.
yeah, I think so. Okay,
I think that
lovely.
creativity is so important for thinking too, right? Like we need the creative influences the logical,
We do.
right? And vice
Imagine,
versa.
imagine, imagine a world without creativity, without creative expression, a
Mhm.
world uniquely driven by logic.
Mhm. Like how would we innovate and have so many really cool, amazing inventions and feats that we have that we've seen all throughout really like history, but obviously we're in a very fast-paced time period now.
Yes, and what about all the mental health that it would provide?
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, it is great for mental health too. Yeah, very important.
Yeah, I mean, we need. I think we need to counterbalance the practical. I love practical stuff, but we need like there is the logic, the practical, the reason,
Mhm.
but we also need the innocence. I'm not saying innocence as in
Yes, I
silly
know what you're
fun.
saying. Yeah.
Like this innocence that the arts push us or take us to experience. Like, hey, there is the
Mhm.
world here, there is nature, there is some beauty, there is some joy here. We need that. We need those things. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you. Okay,
Yeah.
lovely. And finally, my last question, promise. How can people find out more about you and work with you and connect with you?
Yeah, so I can be found on in a variety of ways, which I'm guessing you're going to drop in the show notes so people don't have
I
to
will.
try to spell my last name. But you can connect with me on my website, which is jencolombo.com. If you sign up for my newsletter, I actually do have a freebie on ways to get into the creative flow, along with a creative activity and a little mini meditation that you can listen to if you'd like. I also hang out. I'm on Facebook, but I also hang out mainly on Instagram, and I'm at Jen Faye Art, and you'll find me doing behind the scenes stuff, sharing tips on creativity. You'll see me doing some card pulls and other things on there as well. And you can find all the information about working with me if you chose to on my website. I do private creative explorations as well as group stuff. Um, or if you want any of my other services that are available as well, you can find everything there.
Okay, beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you do spark a lot of joy on your Instagram, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. That is one of my goals, is to bring joy and peace
Yeah.
through that page. So,
Generator vibe.
yeah.
Well, let's not reduce ourselves to that, but
Yeah. Yeah.
all right. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your time today. It was lovely chatting with you and knowing about you and your process more.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you feel inspired to go create, make art, experiment, play, explore, and also, if that's not already your thing, to add a little bit of structure to it. So that from this structure and organization, more freedom and more enjoyment can come. And you noticed towards the end of the episode, I asked Jen some questions about her senses, and then if you see if you watch the podcast, if you watch the video version, you can see her face lighting up, and mine also lighting up as we're talking about our senses. And that's an exercise I would really invite you to do on a regular basis. We talk also about grounding a lot in that episode, and that goes with grounding. Connecting to your senses is so helpful to come back to the present, come back to your body, but also come back to your environment. Because we're never alone on an island, on a desert island. Even if we're on a desert island, there is something there, like sand maybe, and the sky, and maybe some insects or birds. But you know what I mean? It's like we're never really alone. We are part. What I mean is that we as human beings, we are part of the ecosystem, of the Earth ecosystem, and our senses are tools, are vehicles to communicate with the external world, to perceive it, to make sense of it, to translate it into information, into what, and then we translate it into words within our brain, but the information comes to us, comes to our brain through our senses. And we all use a combination of our five senses in the way we represent the world, especially us, highly sensitive people. Our senses are much more heightened than for the average of the population. But that being said, we all have one that is that is dominant, that is really stronger, and just like it's like a super sense, a superpower, and just like with any superpower, it's a double-edged sword. Our heightened awareness can lead to overstimulation and overwhelm at times. I'm sure you've experienced that. And yet, by leaning into a more in-depth connection to our senses, we can harness their wisdom and turn them into strengths, because they are the gateway to our intuition. If you would like to play and find out what is your super sense, you can find it by taking a quiz I created, which is called Your Super Sense. What's Your Super Sense quiz? And you can find it by going on my website under the free resources section, and also by clicking the link in the show notes. On this note, I wish you a beautiful end of day, and see you next time. Bye. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if it has inspired you, please share it around you. Also, if you feel called to it, please subscribe to the podcast and leave me a review. It really helps to spread the word out. All your questions are welcome. You can send them to me on Instagram at rim.creativeenergy.com or email me via my website, rimcreativeenergy.com. And don't worry, I'll share in the show notes exactly where to find me. Until next time, sending you loving creative energy.